So last video we looked at just simplifying ratios. This one we're looking at our ratio problems. So we've got a recipe for making pizza bases is plain flour, water and yeast in the ratio of 16 to 10 to 1 by weight. So John is making pizza dough using 480 grams of flour. So how many grams of water and yeast will he need to add? So if we put in our ratio, we have flour to water to yeast in the ratio of 16 to 10 to 1. Now this is important. Usually when we have ratio problems, the things that they use in the ratios will all start with a different letter, so you can very easily set that up for yourself. So he's using 480 grams of flour. So where our flour is, we'd put 480 grams. And then what I'm trying to do is find, well, how much water and yeast do I need? So in order to get from 480 to 16, we would say, well, what's 480 divided by 16? That tells me there's 30. So to get from 16 to 480, I'm multiplying by 30. So I need to do the same thing to each of the other parts of the ratio. So for water, it would be 10 times 30, which tells me I need 300 grams of water. And for our yeast, it's going to be 1 times 30. So I need 30 grams of yeast. Then what it says is John makes all the dough for his pizza shop in the morning, and he calculates that he needs to mix 3 kilos of water with the other ingredients. So how much flour and yeast does he need? So we start with our same ratio that we used above. And this time we're putting in 3 kilos of water. Now, because we're looking at grams in some of the other ones, I'm going to put this into grams. So if we have 3 kilos, that becomes 3,000 grams. Can just make it a little bit easier to work with, especially with our yeast, because it's only a small portion there. So the first thing we had to do was work out, well, how did I get from 10 to 3,000? So I go 3,000 divided by 10, which tells me I'm multiplying by 300 to find our flour and our yeast. So for our flour, I would have 16 times 300, which is going to give me 4,800 grams or 4.8 kilograms, depending on what the question's asking, how they want you to answer. And for our yeast, we would have 1 times 300, which gives us 300 grams of yeast. So that's why it can be really handy to put it into grams, especially if you've got one of your parts to your ratio being quite small, so that you don't have to then worry too much about your decimals. You can do it with decimals, just to save that a little bit. And the last one here says, a pizza company uses 3.2 kilograms of yeast in a day. How much flour and water does the company use? So we're still using our same formula. We haven't been told anything different. So 16 to 10 to 1. And we use 3.2 kilos of yeast, so we get 3,200 grams of yeast. Again, you can keep it in kilos if you want. I'm putting it in grams to do all of these the same. So this one's quite simple because we know how to get from 1 to 3,200. We're going to times by 3,200. So to find our flour, it's going to be 16 times 3,200. which gives us 51,200 grams, or it's going to give us 51.2 kilograms of flour. And our water would be 10 times 3,200, which is going to give us 32,000 grams of water, or 32 kilograms. So that's what we need to do for each of those questions. Make sure you put them into those same units when you're working.